Good afternoon, Husky fans. Thank you for tuning into the 12th episode. Wow, it's been that long already. 12th episode of Husky Dash with your hosts at Nathan Mathisen and myself at 9_3/4. Today, we're going to be diving into our biggest takeaways from fall camp, some concerns, questions, comments, surprises in the depth chart, as well as rehashing for the last time who, what, where, when, why, how, all you need to know about the quarterback battle. Again, as a reminder, please feel free to drop a comment or even just a hello, and we'll make sure we cover it, even if it may possibly contain profanity, as well as our segments and anything that comes up in the chat. Now then, for dog snacks, Mike Varell recently tweeted that the UW baseball team had to pause off-season workouts after discovering positive COVID-19 cases and using contact tracing within the program. So glad to see the contact tracing working, sad to see the COVID. In other news, today, November 4th, marks UW's 159th birthday after its founding day back in 1861. Wow, that's been a long time. And with that and the egregiously long and slightly annoying intro, we can get into our first segment, what we've learned from fall ball. Nathan, take us away.
Well, first, just going to let it be out there, we learned nothing about the QB position. It's still just four guys competing for all we know. Who knows? Could be anyone. But getting to what we did learn, something that the coaches talked over and over again at the press conferences after the practices was just how talented this wide receiver group is, especially highlighting the three freshmen in Jalen McMillan, Rome Odunze, and then Sawyer Racanelli. They talked constantly about them being very well developed for being true freshmen and very explosive. So looking at the wide receivers we already had, adding these three freshmen into it, UW's looking like they have a very strong wide receiver group coming into the season. It'll be a hard time getting all of them on the field, so that'll be a struggle. But I mean, it's better to struggle to get everyone out there than not have anyone who can play. So that's one thing that I really took away. And then another thing was that I read about the offensive line group. It's a very, very deep group. We talked about the offensive line 2 or 3 episodes ago, and we mentioned how deep it is then, and still the coaches are talking about it. There are, I believe, 5 true freshman offensive line, and Jackson Kirkland, kind of the leader on the offensive line, a possible NFL pick next year, talked about how these guys are light years ahead of where he was as a freshman. The center on UW also said they were miles ahead as a freshman. So the young offensive line group, none of them will probably get much playing time to start the season or to end it, probably with how deep the overall offensive line is. But look for them to make an impact 1 or 2 years down the road. And that's something that you got to have an offensive line to succeed, especially in what seems to be a run-first offense UW's looking to possess with a power back. Those were 2 of the takeaways. You want to take over and start talking about?
Yeah, you were talking about players that the coaches were mentioning and kind of picking out by name during the press conferences, interviews, media contacts. And another name that I wanted to throw alongside Jackson Kirkland, it's like a little Venn diagram, another circle that he fits in. Him, K-Dot, others like Keith Taylor, Elijah Molden, those 4 I know were receiving a lot of praise from the head coach, Jimmy Lake, as well as some other of the coaches and even other players on the field. As really having filled in those shoes and stepped up into being the leader roles. I mean, those guys were called out by name, all in the same answer from a press conference. I think it was by Lake, and where he answered and said that those guys were absolutely stepping up. Another thing I think that goes a little under the radar when you get these like first week before the games, that like penultimate step until you start competing again, is that Jimmy Lake did say that fall ball has resulted in some bumps and bruises, but that it was a very hard and singular no when asked if there were any season-ending injuries or mishaps. So that's always good news coming out of it. You never want that to be the first line in the article about your team heading into your first week of games.
Touching off of what you just said there really quick, just talking about how hard fall camp has been, you mentioned that with the scrimmages, it's basically been like they've played 2 to 3 games already, which is what you love to see going into this odd season. And I don't remember which coach it was, but one of them talked about this has been the most they've tackled in a camp before a season at his time at UW, which that's
Yeah,
something you'd love to see.
no, absolutely. I was just about to bring up that quote you were mentioning with
Oh,
talking about
geez.
the increased hitting, but then pairing that again. I think the same coach. I'm pretty sure it was Jimmy Lake, saying that yes, they've had a lot more hitting than they have had in the past, but regardless of that, they still feel very strong, and obviously not seeing anyone get moved to injury reserve or off of the two deep or even the starting sets of rotations. Not seeing anyone get removed from that on paper is a good sign as well. One of my bigger takeaways for the entire fall ball was that throughout the summer, I mean, there were questions over and over and over and over again. Is Jimmy Lake going to fit in? Is John Donovan going to fit in? Is this all going to meld? Is it going to flesh together? Watching the scrimmages, I think it's pretty obvious that we have a competitive offense. So that offense on some form, whether or not you agree or disagree, whether it's on the absolute lowest foundation of the word, for meshing together, if it's at the highest degree of it, something on our offense is clicking. That's the important takeaway. I think something on our offense is absolutely clicking, whether that stems from John Donovan or whether that stems from Jimmy Lake. I don't know. It's working. Something here is working. The positions, the questions about, no, this is not going to work. It's going to be gritty. It's going to be a little clunky. We're not going to start off well with our first game. I think all of those can go out the window. I absolutely think our team's starting to click together. I don't think this is the highest we can go. I think the skill ceiling for this, the potential that we have to get better is still there. I'm just very happy that one of my takeaways can be, it seems like it's starting to work. And that's my biggest takeaway from fall camp.
Yeah, I think touching on the offense, how they seem to be clicking. I mean, really the only question mark at the offense is the quarterback position. I mean, I talked about the wide receiver group being young and deep, the offensive line group being another young group that's got lots of depth behind it. And then bringing it home on the offense, the running back group is another group that we'll get into that later with the depth chart, but it's very deep. Well, it's four guys, but they're all four guys that could play. You look at Sean McGrew, Richard Newton, he carried the load last year alongside Savon Ahmed, who's graduated now. Kamari Pleasant has put on some weight this offseason to bulking up a bit. And then just bringing it in at the bottom is Cameron Davis, who he redshirted last year, so he's a redshirt freshman. And the coaches have talked a lot about him running hard, being really competitive, which you love to see out of the young running backs, and you just love to see out of a running back, just wanting to run hard, go through contact, and get into the end zone. Bringing it towards like the defense, what we learned from them, you mentioned it before with naming all these guys, Keith Taylor, Elijah Molded. The defensive back group going into fall camp was thought of as the strongest position group, and I think this camp has solidified that. A lot of veterans on it with Elijah Molden, a lot of young rising stars, Trent McDuffie, Asa Turner. These guys are all big-time players. And then bringing it towards the linebacker group, you have a lot of talk of Edifon Ulofoshio and then Jackson Sermon. The linebacker coach mentioned them as the two starters. A couple weeks ago, he said that they'd probably be the two starters if they started now. And on the depth chart, they're the two starters. So that's a good sign that they were able to keep their spots, keep competing. And overall, the defense is going to definitely be a strong spot for this Husky team.
No, yeah, without a doubt. I was looking at a very interesting article. I don't remember where it was from. It was an opinion piece, I think maybe it was a staff writer, possibly, talking about when you see these preseason scrimmages, like what scores do you want to see out of it? All of the scores from, I think it was 4 total scrimmage games that we played, gold versus purple. All of them were falling in those boundaries of like the scores you want to see, hovering in the 20s range. Neither team like absolutely dominating the other. You're not seeing super low scores, super high scores. But I think it's absolutely safe to say, and I think it's correct to say, that we're looking like we're going to have a very, very good start to the season. You delved into it a little bit, and if I haven't heard a better opportunity for a transition, then I might as well go Def or something, because I think you've set us up perfectly to head into our second segment where we start ripping apart the surprises that came with the 7-day away depth chart draft. Really quickly, I just wanted to point out that Jimmy Lake, at the start of all of this, I think he tweeted this or released this information like minutes after releasing this depth chart. He said, I'm an equal opportunity employer. If you show that you know our techniques and schemes in all three phases of the game, he said, you're going to move up the depth chart. There are guys who have moved up the depth chart, and we absolutely have seen that. Nathan, who's someone you think that just surprised everybody out there in terms of where they ended up?
I think bringing up with what you just said, this is perfect transition, talking about Jimmy Lake saying if you play hard, basically, you can get a chance to move up. And at the safety position, that's where one of the shocking depth chart orderings was for me personally. I mean, last year you had Miles Bryant, and then who's now often graduated and he's into the NFL. But then alongside playing the other safety positions were split between Cameron Williams and Asa Turner. I mean, they both seemed to play good last year, good solid football for being young. Asa Turner was a true freshman. Not sure Cameron Williams, I think he was also a freshman, but don't quote me on that. So naturally, you think those two guys are going to be the guys starting safety this year, right? They were the only other two safeties that really played alongside Miles Bryant. But no, at the depth chart, you have Asa Turner, and alongside him, you have Alex Cook, who a lot of people don't know his name. He actually converted from wide receiver in 2018. So 2019, last year, was his first time playing the safety position. And I don't think he really played a snap of defense. He was a special teams guy, made a few tackles. And I mean, he played safety or defensive back in high school. As a senior, he had 92 tackles playing both ways. So he could do it on the high school level. I guess it wasn't working out for him at wide receiver. So he decided to switch his positions last year. He had a year in the Jimmy Lake defensive system, learning it, mastering it. And I guess coming into fall camp, he showed the coaches that he deserves the other safety spot. The Coach K, the co-defensive coordinator, said on Alex Cook, he said he's earned everything he's got by how he went about his business and playing fast and just playing physical. Which, I mean, what more can you ask for from a safety? You want him to be physical. You want him to be able to play fast. So that was really the first main takeaway I got from the depth chart, just the safety position. A little shocking, but I mean, we'll see how it works out.
I mean, you want to talk about shocking? We can take a look at the running back or tailback, to be more specific, for the depth chart. The two deep has Kamari Pleasant and Sean McGrew, if I'm not mistaken, for the two deep.
It's Kamari Pleasant and then Sean McGrew or Richard Noon. So they haven't set a second.
They haven't set the second yet. Sorry, but Kamari Pleasant starting still is enough of a shock. Am I right? I mean, he's okay. So he's 6 foot. He's 230 pounds. He redshirted his freshman year of 2016. He's made 26 appearances out of 40 games of the past 2 or 3 seasons. 3 seasons he played. He's now a senior in his last year. Exact same story as Sean McGrew, redshirt freshman. I mean, same class, almost the exact same amount of game appearances. McGrew had 6 more on him out of the same amount of 40 games. Here's where it gets interesting, though. McGrew, who hasn't even been decided as a backup, he's just in the air, had 3 starts out of his 32 appearances, had 122 rushes, 627 yards, 4 TDs, really good averages, 19.6 yards a game on average he was gaining. Stuff like that. Great guy, right? Pleasance had no starts, was never listed as a backup for a significant period of time. Like occasionally he would get listed as a backup. And he had 63 rushes, 268 yards, only 2 touchdowns, and barely eked over 10 yards a game. Why McGrew isn't starting over him, I don't know, but there's one factor you've got to look at for that, and it has to be weight or size. I mean, Pleasance, 3 inches of height on McGrew and 55 pounds of weight coming out of fall camp. That is insane when you think about impact force, when you think about the ability to hit holes, to run guys over, to be the low man and win those one-on-ones. When you have 55 extra pounds of weight, I mean, you're doing multiplication to calculate force. You're not actually doing that on the football field. But for the guys on the sideline who might be doing that, 55 pounds is a lot of weight to add on to someone's mass when you're trying to figure out forces, and that's just insane. Now, the big question, though, that is on everybody's mind when it comes to the running back position. And Nathan, you can shout out a disagreement if you want, but I don't think you're going to. Is Richard Newton not coming out on top here? Those statistics that I threw at you for the other two guys, McGrew and Pleasant, those were for their career statistics. I mean, those were over the 3 years that they've played ball already. Richard Newton, in only 10 appearances of a single season, 10 appearances in 13 games, the man's gone 117 rushes for 498 yards and 10 TDs, averaging just under 50 yards a game. I just don't know where you go from there. And I just don't know. It's surprising. It's absolutely surprising that there has to be something the coaches don't know and they're not telling us for Newton to not come out on top of that depth order.
Yeah, it's very surprising. I mean, if you watched the show, if you followed the show, I've probably talked about Richard Newton on 3 or 4 episodes already. I'm a huge fan of him. I thought he'd play an extremely key role. I thought he'd be the starter week 1. I mean, not to say, I mean, Jimmy Lake said the depth chart can change. You don't know. I mean, it's probably going to be a rotation at tailback with those 3 guys, and then Cameron Davis maybe later on in the season. Yeah, just bringing it back. Pleasant as the RB1. I mean, we're just judging him off of, what he's done before. I mean, last year wasn't very good. 16 carries, 35 yards in his 11 games just last year. So that's not what you want your starting running back to do. But, I mean, he gained weight, which the coaches say they want a big running back. He put on 17 pounds to get up to the 230. And the running back coach said that he carries the weight good. The really surprising thing from this quote on him, he said that he, let me see if I can get it right. He can catch the ball good, he can block really good, and he runs the ball decent enough. See, I'm stuck on he runs the ball decent enough. I want my running back to be able to run the ball well, run the ball good, not decent enough. So I don't know. It's tough to say. I mean, we're judging him off of a year ago. Kamari Pleasant obviously showed something in camp. So let's see what he can do week 1, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the only possible answer I have for you there was I pulled out a table. I actually made a table on Google Docs, so not that impressive. Just insert. 4x5 had Pleasant, McGrew, Newton on top, 4 categories below: running, catching, blocking, and their size. McGrew out of the picture already. No one knows how well he can catch. He hasn't recorded a single reception in his 4 years of being on the UW football team. So that's just out of the question. McGrew has no recorded receptions. Newton has a couple. Pleasant apparently through fall camp has had a decent catching game, has had a decent enough apparently running game, apparently very good blocking skills, and his size now is amazing. McGrew's size not that great, Newton's size great, sure, but he doesn't yet have that. I feel like that ability to consistently block on those tough plays where you have not flipping, I don't remember the word for it, stunting linebackers and linemen, when you have those guys blaring through holes left and right. And then these guys are fast. It's not high school anymore. And yeah, Newton's had some work in this region, but I mean, he has to be blocking consistently. So I think what we're going to see a lot of is Pleasant getting in there, punching in those small yardage plays. Possibly if his running game has improved this much, we'll see him for bigger runs and more consistently throughout. But I think they need to get Pleasant on that front foot and have him be the starting running back, so they also get used to him blocking. The only reason I say this now is because if Newton comes in, they're just going to know it's a run. But if you have 2 guys running the ball, one of them blocking most of the time, now you can start sneaking in the longer run plays with Newton because they don't know if he's going to block, if he's going to run, or what's going to happen. That's the only answer I could possibly have for you there.
So moving on, I guess, and just McGrew does actually have 16 catches. So you missed the stat there, but not that many catches. But he does have 16 catches according to ESPN. But just bringing it on to the tight end position, it basically came out basically how most people projected for the first 2 with K. Dotton, future NFL player. Basically next year it'll be a day 2, day 3 pick, maybe day 1 if he really shines. And then Jack Westover, who just this year, I believe it was, he earned scholarship. That's big for him. He got on the scholarship. He's more of a blocking guy. And the third spot was kind of the more shocking one, not super shocking. Mark Redmond is listed as it over Devin Culp, who you actually talked about earlier, Devin Culp being someone you were high on when we talked about tight ends week 3 or 4. And the really only reason I could see Mark Redmond as being listed above him is just he has more potential, I guess, as a true freshman. I mean, he's 6'6", 250 pounds compared to Devin Culp, 6'3", 245. So that could be the reason Redmond got the nod over Culp. But I mean, we'll see what happens really week 1.
Yeah, absolutely. Jumping back just to correct myself, thank you. I meant to read the statistic. I just glanced over it and skipped really quick. Newton is the only one with a receiving touchdown. Neither McGrew nor Pleasant have those. Also, fun fact: Newton's also thrown for a 13-yard TD. So that's I don't know, a trick up his sleeve, I guess. Running out of time, heading into Cube. Actually, before we do that, let me just touch on 2 more quick things. Wide receiver group, big news there. Rome Odunze did not make any of the deep 2s for all 3 of the sorted positions. Who we do have is Puka Nakua, Terrell Bynum, Ty Jones
Nakua.
as the Nakua. I'm so sorry, Puka Nakua, Terrell Bynum, Ty Jones as the starters. As their backups, we have Jordan Chin, Austin Osborne, who the coaches have said has been having a great camp up until they had the press conference at the very least. And Jalen McMillan, obviously Roma Dunze is missing, as well as Sawyer Racanelli. In other news for receivers, Taj Davis opted out for the 2020 season. And then just throwing it back to a previous episode, really quick touch, Nathan. Race Porter, for me at least, sadly took the punter position. He edged out Tristan Brown, the JUCO punter that I was absolutely hot. Out of context, that would have been weird. That I was absolutely just boasting about left, right, and center. I mean, Brown was number 2 nationally ranked punter, number 1 JUCO punter last year, 2019 Las Vegas punting championship win. Props to Porter, though. He just recently went on to scholarship after walking on and redshirting back in 2016. So props to the guy for winning the position. Tristan Porter, I still believe in you. Segment 3, we get to dive into kind of like a depth chart again, but we're going to rehash everything you guys need to know about the 4 quarterbacks that are still and currently ongoing in their battle for first place or starting position. Nathan, hit me with some facts.
All right, so I'll just start off with the quarterback that most Husky fans know. I mean, he's been on the Huskies for 3 years now. Jacob Sirmon. I mean, he's a redshirt sophomore. His size is very similar to Jacob Eason's. He's 6'5", 240 pounds. Eason was 6'6", 230 pounds, so an inch shorter and 10 pounds heavier. I mean, coming out of high school, he was the number 1 ranked prospect in Washington. Tons of hype. I mean, this was back 3 years ago, though. So, I mean, and the knock on him, I guess, could be he hasn't been able to win the starting job. But originally, when he committed to UW, it was just Jake Browning, and the plan was probably for him to sit behind Browning for a year, learn from him, and then he'd take the ropes last year. But as we all know, Jacob Eason decided to transfer here, and he beat out Jacob Sirmon. Lots of Jacobs in the UW QB tree, I guess. So
Yeah.
Sirmon sits behind Browning, sits behind Eason. He's got a lot of experience, I guess, learning behind these guys. Not a lot of game experience. In his 3 years on the UW roster, he's thrown a total of 3 passes for 19 yards. He's 2 for 3. So not a lot of game action, which, I mean, that could be concerning a bit for a quarterback throwing in when it's his 3rd year and he hasn't been able to get on the field. But looking at it from a perspective on the positive side, I mean, he's got to learn behind 2 great college quarterbacks, Jake Browning, Jacob Eason. So he's got a lot of knowledge. But then again, we're in a new offensive system. So how much knowledge does that transfer over? And then so I'm getting my Jacobs confused here. Jacob Sirmon is similar in size to Jacob Eason, but he doesn't quite have the cannon of an arm Eason has. He's more similar in Browning, as he's an accurate quarterback and he's a guy who sticks in the pocket. So not a mobile quarterback. You can take it away with one of your guys.
Yeah, one guy that so far has been praised by Jimmy Lake for being able to run and scramble is Kevin Thompson. He's the pretty old transfer QB. No one really knew why he got brought in. I'm going to make an argument for him tonight on why this may have turned out, in retrospect at least, to be an amazing pickup for the Huskies. He's 6'1", 200 pounds, dead even. He threw for 3,200, just over 3,200 yards, 27 touchdowns, and only 8 interceptions over 12 games. And I think the reason here why I think there's a good argument to be made for why Thompson might be the starting QB is because he also had 619 yards of rushing and 12 more scores on top of it. And with something when you have this fresh O line, I mean, an experienced older guy like Thompson might be exactly who you need to stay calm and just obviously be experienced when your new O line still fleshing together, might have the occasional broken play, might have the occasional really tough situation they don't know how to handle. And to have a QB who can either get the ball off before that rush gets there, to either scramble out of the pocket or even to just know when to tuck it and take the sack and not distribute blame to the O line. That might be something they need with Thompson as well, because of the like no season loss with this season. Thompson now has the ability to play this year and next year, giving guys like Eason, like Morris, like Sermon, those 2 extra years, maybe even just this 1 extra year of the season to get that kind of foot up on the rest of the league. But then again, talking about Morris, he was listed, I think, a little generously at 6 foot, 200 pounds. However, again, an argument can be made for this. You have Drew Brees, who is 6 foot. If you don't think he's going into the Hall of Fame, I don't know how I need to defend that. Drew Brees is going to end up in the Hall of Fame. Like, he's 6 foot. Russell Wilson, 5'11". I also think this man's going to end up in the Hall of Fame. Under 6 foot, Dylan Morris, technically taller than him on paper. Doug Flutie, 5'10", absolutely deserving of Hall of Fame. You have other guys, super old. I don't know if you guys get these references, but Sonny Jurgensen, Fran Tarkenton, 5'11", 6 foot, respectively. Both of them already in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But I mean, the guy's accurate. He's consistent. He has range. Offensive squad MVP for last season. So I mean, like, Morris is definitely in the conversation, and that's. I mean, there's arguments for all of these guys. You could be 120% right picking any 4 of them as the starters. I mean, they all have an amazing list of pros for each of them. Personally, I'm a fan of the Thompson thing, you know, kind of taking advantage of the extra year of eligibility. How do you feel about the situation?
Yeah, it's a good situation. Just touching on the last guy of the 4, Ethan Garver's really quick. He's the youngest of the bunch. He's a true freshman. He's 6'3", 215 pounds, so he's taller than Thompson and
Morris.
I just drew Dylan Morris. Yeah, he's taller than both those guys, shorter than Sermon. One thing about Garver's is he's a winner. I mean, he was 16-0 senior year of high school, won the state championship. He comes in with great high school stats. I mean, threw for huge number, over 5,000 yards, over 70 touchdown passes, only 5 interceptions his senior year. He's got great stats from there. He's got great potential, very accurate quarterback. He can move slightly, maybe not on the Kevin Thompson level, but he can run. He had 570 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns his senior year running the ball. And just touching, he's a true freshman, which, you know, UW has started a true freshman before in Jacob Eason, so it could happen again. But I'm with you. I'm kind of on the Thompson train right now. Heard a lot of good stuff about him. So that would be my pick right now.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to hear it because we can share seats on the Thompson train, because I think this guy's going to end up starting. It's going to give great experience to these younger guys. This is not to say, though, that maybe one of the younger guys wins this out next game in 2, 3, 4 weeks. I mean, it's football. Anything can happen. Effort can trump an absolutely huge amount of things out on the field. But yeah, that's about it. I just want to thank you guys all again for tuning in. Absolutely love it. I'm Joseph Claypoole, and this is Nathan Mathisen. Sorry for nearly messing your name up there. You can follow us on our different social medias with the @ that you currently see on screen. We're just a small part of the Dashports family, so if you'd like to meet the rest of the crew, please check out our website, dashports.tv, and our partner, sportspac12.com, where you can also read further into segments from our weekly shows, all of which are written by Nathan. I'm not saying some anymore. They're definitely all being written by you at this point. At least for our episode, our weekly episode, they're all being written by this guy. Please go check him out. Give him the praise. Give him the audience that he deserves. Now, if you'd like to revisit the best moments of today's episode, head over to our website where you can find clips, quips, tips, rips, terrible jokes. Those were all meant to rhyme. It's been 12 weeks if you haven't gotten it yet. That was on purpose. And as many full episodes as you guys can stand, all in one place, all for free, dashsports.tv. We'll see you next week, but for now, this is Husky Dash signing off.